Materials supplied by Microsoft Corporation may be used for internal review, analysis, or research only. Any editing, reproduction, publication, rebroadcast, public showing, internet, or public display is forbidden and may violate copyright law.
So let's start this session. I'm Feng Zhao from Microsoft Research, and it is my pleasure to organize this session and introduce the speakers. And this is about sensors and the large-scale operating systems, using the analogy that I'll actually say a few words about. Many of you have heard about sensors, or more recently in the last decade or so, about Internet of Things, or IoT. And by all these predictions that you have seen, IoT is coming, or many people say it's already here. 50 billion sensors by 2020, that's one of the predictions that in one of a recent industrial report. Many pundits have been predicting that there are going to be trillions of dollars in the industry that's going to be affected by these sensors, the ability to be able to extract data and analytics and insights from that. So, I'm going to just use the first minute or so to set a little context for this. So number one is the forces, the technological forces behind this is really the very rapid advancement in hardware, the ability to make very small devices and make it extremely low power and make it cheap. And the second is that there's a standardization movement in standardized ways that these devices talk to each other. And these are low-power wireless links, and some of them are actually extremely adaptive and long-lasting. But I think the real interesting bits that's coming from this is really the data coming from sensors. So hence what I call from sensor to the insight. And I think the insight is really what the people care about in terms of actually sense making about what is going on, but also taking appropriate actions. So this is about how do we collect data in a way that's scalable, and how do we actually transform the data into knowledge and into insights. Then people who can make a decision can act on the information. And the challenges I see in many of those systems that I personally have built, and many of my colleagues in the audience have been building and developing, and in fact you heard the keynotes earlier in the morning, is that it's very difficult to build systems and applications on top of those devices. And today's practice is that every one of us actually build those so-called the stovepipe monolithic apps that goes from the super nuts, the devices, the sensors, all the way to the resource management, to the middleware, to the data analysis, machine learning, entity extraction, and all the way to the high-level analysis and visualization. That approach actually works for many specific domains, but it will be very difficult to scale out to enable a very large ecosystem of scientific communities and businesses that people can actually write applications, be able to actually build values on top of this data. So the analogy I'm using is really what we need is actually a very clean interface between the devices, what I call the resources. These are sensing, these are control, they are resources. And then separate that from all the application, the ecosystem. Now, application meaning that those different things that's going to take value of the data and do something about it, whether it's action or whether it's actually a sense making. And taking an analogy that this is very similar to how the mobile world take off, is that once you separate the devices from the application, then you can have an independent ecosystem application to evolve. And all the people, every citizen can start writing apps for all the resources that the city exposed, for example, to the public. When does the next bus going to come to my neighborhood? The GPS data is possibly all available that city could actually publish. The data about the health care, the transportation, the energy use, the power grid, lots of those data that many cities start to publish with the very nice goal of making it available for the citizens, for the public to consume and to build an ecosystem. So the analogy I'm using is really this operating system, which is, operating system is nothing but it's an API for the high-level application services to access the resources. In computer, it's the compute, it's the memory, it's the networking, but in IoT, in the sensor system, the resources are sensing, control, all these resources that you can extract data from the physical environment. So this is just my 5-minute, so like a context setting in terms of where the world is coming and what are the great opportunities I think this community that have been looking at the sensors and IoT are facing. So I'm really happy that we have actually 4 distinguished researchers and academicians to actually come to join the session, and they are coming from Beijing and Taipei and Singapore and Wuhan. So what I'm going to do is to ask each one of them to actually give you a short 15-minute introduction to their research, and then at the end of that, if we have time, I'd like to invite all of them at the end of this, towards the end of session, to have a dialogue and Q&A with each of you. So without further ado, let me actually first invite Professor Bai from Tsinghua University. And Professor Bai is an associate professor in the Center for Earth System Science, CESS, of Tsinghua University. And his talk will be, please come on stage, and his talk will be on Global Change 1, the research cyber infrastructure for global change studies. Professor Bai.